And then you had T-Mac, which is pretty much the same thing.
So T-Mac's another one. You don't think T-Mac would have been good even if his career was healthy? Or
Well, he wasn't like that injured though. That's the thing. He had some back problems when he was in Houston, but it wasn't totally crippling like what it did to Penny Hardaway. You know,
Okay.
I think the thing is, if you see T-Mac even before the injuries when he was in Orlando, they still couldn't get past the first round. You know, they had leads in the first round, they still lost. So I think with T-Mac, it wasn't much of a what if. Like pretty much, we knew what type of player he is.
Okay, what if T-Mac wasn't injured and Yao Ming wasn't injured? Do you think that would have been a good team?
Depends because
both of them were kind of...
Depends on what you mean by the injury to T-Mac though.
Okay, so if T-Mac didn't have the back injury, if Yao Ming didn't have his foot injuries.
The thing is, I don't think T-Mac's back injury... Like, T-Mac had the back injuries in Rockets' time, but he was still able to play. Yao Ming was a bigger what if. Because Yao Ming literally can't play anymore. And
so Yao Ming, when he was healthy, he was actually pretty good.
He was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. So what if they... Yeah, in that situation, if they're both...
my problem with T-Mac was the later T-Mac wasn't a very good defender anymore. That was my biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember back in... Was it 08? I don't remember, but it was the year that the Yao Ming Rockets first got past the first round finally.
Yep.
So that year in the regular season, prior years, they were never able to get past the first round. Yao was never able to get past the first round. The Rockets weren't able to. Even when T-Mac was there the previous year or two, they didn't get past the first round all those years. And finally, that one year, T-Mac was actually injured and he was out for the rest of the season.
Yep.
I made a prediction during that year. I said that, wow, this is the first year the Rockets are going to make it past the first round. I actually made that prediction online.
Yep.
And Houston Rockets fans were all pissed off at me. And they're saying, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And I was saying, no, it's because T-Mac doesn't have a very... By that time in his career, T-Mac didn't have a very smart game. He was taking too many bad shots.
Okay.
His team would play really hard on defense to get the rebound, get the possession back, and T-Mac would dribble the ball up court and just pull for a three-point shot early in the shot clock all the time. And then more often than not, it misses, and then that's it. It's a one-and-done shot. And the problem with T-Mac with that is, first of all, Yao is not going to play as aggressive too, because Yao is naturally a nice guy, and he's totally fine deferring to T-Mac, because Yao is a very unselfish player. So when T-Mac is in a game, mentally, I find Yao doesn't feel like he's the man.
Okay.
And he's not quite as aggressive to get his own shot offensively. But Yao is by far the much more efficient player. You know, he shoots a much more higher percentage, you know, than T-Mac's just pulling up long-range three-point shots. And then so I felt that and also T-Mac actually wasn't a very good defender anymore by that time. By that point in his career, T-Mac wasn't much of a defender. And he was taking too many bad shots, and the ball wasn't moving, and Yao is less aggressive when T-Mac is playing.
Okay.
So then once T-Mac was out, now I was thinking, now you have Shane Battier, which is one of the best defenders in the league, and you have Ron Artest, who is also one of the best defenders in the league. Both of these guys are going to get more minutes now. So now your defense is instantly better because both of your best defenders are getting more minutes. And also now, Yao, who's your most efficient player, is going to be more aggressive, and he's going to get his more shots off, and he's more efficient. So you can have more efficient offense, a more aggressive center, and you have better perimeter defenders now playing all the time, and none of those bad three-point shots that T-Mac was taking all the time, and now they're going to start moving the ball around. And that's why my prediction was now they're going to finally make it past the first round.
Yeah, which they did.
Which they did. Yeah, exactly, which they did.
So it's interesting they made farther with just Yao than with just T-Mac.
The thing is, once they made that trade for T-Mac, I felt it wasn't good for the team. I felt they lost too much on that trade because they traded with Coutinho Mobley and Steve Francis for T-Mac.
Steve Francis is pretty good too.
And that was too much because both Steve Francis and Coutinho Mobley were really good players.
Yep.
I mean, Coutinho Mobley used to give Kobe fits. When they used to play the Lakers in the playoffs, Coutinho Mobley was actually matching it with Kobe point for point. Kobe had a tough time scoring on Coutinho Mobley, even in the post. Coutinho was actually shorter than Kobe, but Kobe tried to post him up. I saw so many times Coutinho would just strip the ball away from Kobe on the turnaround fadeaway. And so I think they lost way too much giving up Coutinho Mobley and Steve Francis by bringing in a Tracy McGrady who doesn't play defense anymore. Because both Francis and Mobley at the time were both really good defenders, and they're both high energy players, and they both like to drive into the paint. And actually Mobley was a pretty efficient player too. And then so now I feel like now you traded for a guy who, sure, he was leading the league in scoring, but that's because he was playing on a not very good team, and he was just taking a lot of shots. Kind
Yeah,
of like
his usage rate was very high.
exactly, it was just a
Yeah.
high usage rate, like what we saw Kobe did post Shaq for a little while. But
Or we saw Iverson do pretty much his whole career.
exactly. So you're just bringing
Yeah.
that in, but then it wasn't efficient, and he's just taking bad shots to get those points, and you're losing defense, and you're losing some penetration, and I felt it wasn't a good trade. You know?
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So you think like Yao had if Yao was healthy, he would have the bigger what if career, like.
Oh, compared to T-Mac? Yeah, because I don't even think T-Mac's career was that big of a what if. But Yao's was a bit more of a what if, because I think if Yao didn't get that injury to his leg, he would have had quite a few more good years, because he was just, I think, pretty much entering his peak at that point.
He was a solid, 25-10 guy in his prime if he was really healthy.
Yeah, easily. But ironically, too, although his stats were at his best up to that point when he got injured, I actually felt the best version of Yao was in his first couple of years before he got buff.
Okay.
Because when he first came into the league, he was really, really thin.
Yep.
So when he was much more thinner, I think he was a lot more mobile and a lot more nimble. And I remember he was actually a better presence on defense, on help defense, and also on rebounding, because he was able to get to the spots faster. And so he was even giving Duncan Robinson a tough time by himself in his rookie year. Him by himself was giving both of them a tough time because he was thinner, but he was always mobile and always just on them all the time. But once he started lifting weights, and then his upper body got a lot bigger, his stats did go up because of usage rate, but I don't think his game was quite as good defensively and on the boards. He actually became a defensive liability, and also a liability on rebounding too, because he couldn't get to the spots fast enough. So what they did was, when he bulked up, sure, he was able to pound people a bit more in the post, but the thing is, I think he lost a lot of his natural footwork.
Yeah, his flexibility.
Yeah, because he used to have a lot of Hakeem Olajuwon moves.
Yep.
But he stopped doing that later on. He got big and strong, so all he did was just knock the guy and then play like Patrick Ewing for a turnaround jump shot.
Yeah, it's kind of sad because he was one of the last players that entered the league with that kind of fundamental footwork.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. But ironically, also Ewing was actually the assistant coach for the Rockets too during that time.
Yeah.
So once he bulked up, he started playing like Ewing, which I'm not. I think Ewing's a great player, but I think
But he's not Hakeem.
Yeah,
but
exactly,
being like Hakeem is better than being like Ewing.
Anyways,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you watch when Yao got buffed up, and whenever they're playing in the playoffs, what teams would do, they would actually put a smaller big man on Yao Ming.
Yep.
And they feel they didn't lose anything because they feel it's actually a mismatch and a benefit for them that Yao Ming's on him. So they would put actually guys like Carlos Boozer head to head with Yao Ming. And Boozer is 6'9". They would put a big man that can shoot from the long two. And then they would do that to draw Yao out. And they would sometimes give a pick to a guy like Carlos Boozer and make Yao guard the pick on a 6'9" big man who's pretty much a power forward out in the long two to drag him out from the paint. And the reason is because once they take that shot from the outside and they drag Yao out, Yao can't get back in time for the rebound because he was too heavy at the time. So if Boozer even misses the shot, Boozer would just run in and just get his own offensive rebound. Or what happens is when they dragged Yao out and they did a pick and roll, and if Yao had to switch on the guard, then the guard would try to take a shot or drive in either way, or he would take a jump shot, and even if it's a miss, Boozer would just slip in to get the offensive rebound because Yao couldn't get back in time too because he was grounding guard. So teams were trying to draw a slower Yao Ming out in his prime, so he can't even get into rebounding position, and then they would just swarm in for the offensive rebounds, and that was a big problem when the Rockets were playing with a heavier Yao. So I think a lighter Yao was actually a lot better because he was able to secure the rebounds.
He's more nimble,
more nimble, securing the rebounds better help defender. Now he actually became a worse defender and a worse rebounder after he bulked up, unfortunately, and I think that put too much stress on his legs too. And since he never had a break because he had to play for China and play for the NBA, and his upper body got heavier, I think it just puts too much stress on your legs, for a big guy like that.
Yeah, and big guys, they're just more prone to injury. They have so much weight on their frame.
So that's why he didn't need to bulk up. He
so
was
him and Walton actually had similar injuries. So
yeah. So in my opinion, I think in the NBA, a lot of the trainers don't necessarily know what they're doing. A lot of the trainers, especially back then, they were only focusing on like weightlifting and adding muscle to these players, and they think, oh yeah, this player needs to add a little bit more muscle and weight so they can
be like Shaq.
They have all these cliches.
Because Shaq was like that.
Well, not Shaq, but they have all these cliches saying, oh yeah, this. A lot of these scouts who don't know what they're talking about, like they have these cliches saying, oh yeah, the only thing he needs to do is add a little bit more weight so he can handle the grind of the NBA season. Like, Like stuff like that doesn't even make sense.
I never got that. They said the same thing about Durant too, and it's
Yeah.
like KD was too skinny, or whatever. That's what scouts said.
Yeah,
Right, and he
exactly.
went second right in the draft.
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't matter because there's other
Yeah.
things to worry about other than just your weight.
And also, you're
Yeah.
adding muscle and weight doesn't help you necessarily get through the grind of an NBA season.
No.
It actually makes your body heavier and is putting more pressure on your joints and your knees and your legs. And you're actually wearing out your joints even faster because you're putting more heavier loads on them. So if you're lighter, you're putting less stress on your knees. And also, you'll be a lot more faster if you're lighter, right? Instead of logging around a big body. And also the modern NBA isn't as physical as the old NBA. Back in the late 80s when it was physical and you're getting hit, Jordan started lifting weights because he wanted to defend himself. And that made sense because he was going against the bad boy Pistons and everything.
Yep.
And he was literally getting hit and he was bleeding.
Yep.
So he started lifting weights to toughen up. But I think Jordan actually started the whole weightlifting thing. He's the one that actually brought the whole weightlifting thing into a fad for basketball players. And then it was really after that everyone's thinking, oh yeah, I need to hit the gym and bulk up. Because prior to Jordan, you would notice, besides Karl Malone,
And David Robinson.
David
Yeah.
Robinson was pretty natural with his body.
Yeah, but he was always.
I'm sure he lifted, but
Yeah.
prior to that, you would see most of those pre-Jordan players. They had like a little bit of a stomach, like they looked a little bit flabby. They didn't look all that buff.
Yeah, most of them. I mean, like Wilt and others. There's some exceptions, but yeah,
exactly.
for the most part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you see like half of the players were kind of like that. In the old NBA. Dennis Johnson came out. You can see a little bit of stomach sticking out from his jersey. Like you got so many of that. But then post Jordan, people started to work out. And a lot of it, I think, was because of Jordan. Jordan was the first guy who really advertised the fact that he was weightlifting to get stronger.
Yeah.
And Jordan was like the first player where you saw he literally changed his body. Like Malone was always big. Robinson was always like that from beginning to end. But Jordan went from a thin guy going into like a really nice chiseled buff physique. And he was one of the first stars to ever change his body like that through a weightlifting program. And that was because he was taking so much hits and so much contacts because it was so physical back then. But the modern NBA is not physical anymore. There's no hand checking. There's no nothing. You don't need to lift weights to buff up. If anything, the modern NBA is about speed. It's about speed and quickness, and so it's not about getting buffer anymore. If you do that, it's actually going to hamper you in the modern NBA because you're going to lose your quickness. The modern NBA is about length, speed, quickness.
Oh yeah,
That's why you see
especially in
guys
the modern NBA.
Exactly.
Back then, it was more beneficial to bulk up.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because
now
back
especially
then
now.
there's hand checking, there's physical, there's no room, people were hitting
And
each
you
other.
got Bill Lambier there
Yeah,
waiting for you.
people were grabbing you off the ball and on the ball.
Yeah.
You're off the ball trying to cut and trying to make a move, moving off the ball. People are still grabbing onto you. It was a wrestling match back then.
Yeah.
Modern NBA, you can't even breathe on a guy loud or like breathe on a guy harder because it's gonna be a foul.
Yeah.
So modern NBA is all about your just it's like an aerobic exercise. The modern NBA, you have to stay thin.
Yeah.
That's why you guys see guys like Curry, KD.
That's why I think Curry and KD probably would not have done as well back then as now. LeBron would have done just as well, despite what people say he flops all the time. And it's like that's just the modern NBA rule.
That's the way the game is.
Yeah, but like KD and Curry now, I'm not sure like about them. Right?
I agree.
Because of their frame.
I think Curry,
Yeah.
I'm not saying they won't be great players. They'll still be great to very good players in the old NBA. But I think KD, Curry, and Harden are three guys that won't be quite as good though.
No.
And it's actually proven. Because if you saw when the NBA made the rule changes, it was roughly around 2005.
Yeah.
Right after they made the rule change in 2005, all these guys, their stats started going up. Like right away the next season. And a lot of these were like the players that we had today, during that time. Yeah, some of them actually like LeBron, everybody, Kobe too. Everybody's stats went up. Iverson, everyone went up.
See what it was became a little bit more fast paced. Then on defense isn't played as hard anymore. Yep.
Yeah, that's why I'm worried when they're saying they want like Anthony Davis to actually lift more weights to get stronger, because I think one benefit of the guy was the fact that he's actually very nimble too and very athletic, and I think he's just fine the way he is. If you make him bigger and stronger, he might not jump as high and he might not be as quick to have so much coverage, because he's able to be quick enough to guard guards outside. He can even guard a point guard outside right now sometimes.
No, it depends. Like he can be strong and he can be lean too.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that he gets more body fat.
Exactly, but or you don't even need more muscle mass. Like if you gain more muscle mass, you're still going to slow down. And the key is what made the Lakers so special is when you play small ball, you still have Anthony Davis in their center who can still guard a point guard. But if he gets too buff, he's going to not be able to do that, and you're going to lose one of his advantages, or his ability to actually guard the drive and pick off the passing lane at the same time. That takes a lot of quickness and nimbleness. And if he gets too buff or from weightlifting, he's going to lose that. And he's just going to be a generic big man if that's the case. And I don't really agree with that. One example was the old Chicago Bulls under Phil Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Phil Jackson actually does not like his players to weightlift.
Mm.
Jordan did it, but Phil Jackson can't control it.
Mm.
But in general, Phil Jackson doesn't like his players to actually weightlift and get too strong and too buff. So he was always really careful about it. Okay, he thinks you lose your flexibility, you lose your quickness if you do that. And that's why back in the day, Tony Kukoc, one big battle that they had was Phil Jackson didn't want Tony Kukoc to actually lift weights.
Mm-hmm.
But then some of the management, they really wanted him to actually strengthen and lift weights. And it was actually a thing between Phil Jackson and management, I think. Yeah. But eventually, I think Phil Jackson won out, and Kukoc didn't have to, because I think Phil probably felt that Kukoc is 6'11". His one thing was his quickness and his ball handling for a 6'11" guy, and he didn't want him to lose that.
So there's a few other interesting what ifs surrounding T-Mac's career. So right when he was drafted, or before he was drafted, somewhere around that time, the Bulls actually wanted to trade for him. They wanted to trade Pippen to get him, right? I don't know if it's Jerry Reinsdorf or Jerry Krause, but they wanted to get T-Mac in a trade with Scottie Pippen. I think at that time they weren't that enamored with Pippen because he had contract disputes and stuff like that. And Michael Jordan pretty much just shut that down. He vetoed it. But that was an interesting what if, I thought, as well. What if T-Mac actually ended up playing with Michael Jordan, right? And he ended up drafting to the Raptors, of course, with his cousin Vince Carter. So that's another interesting what if, is what if he actually stayed in Toronto and played with Vince Carter in his prime, right? Because he left right before Vince Carter's best season, so never really saw that happen. And then, of course, he went to Orlando, where he was supposed to play with Grant Hill, but then Grant Hill got injured, right? So, yeah, that would be an interesting what if as well. How good would the Magic be? I also heard that there was a story that the Magic wanted to trade for Tim Duncan at one point. And Tim Duncan actually was willing to go to the Magic, believe it or not. But Doc Rivers, who was the coach at the Magic at the time, he actually vetoed the trade, and because Tim Duncan, apparently he asked for a request to get a plane for his family or something like that, and Doc Rivers turned that down, and then he said no. So if that's true, then that's just a boneheaded decision, right? I mean, basically you would turn down Tim Duncan because he wants a private plane for his family. That doesn't make sense, right? I mean, think about that. Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, T-Mac, wow. And then of course T-Mac with Yao Ming, right, is another what if. So his whole career is full of what ifs.